Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics. In this video, we are going to be looking at the advantages and disadvantages of the 75-gallon compared to the 60 breeder. They've got a lot in common, but there are some important differences. So if you're looking to buy either one of these aquariums, this is the right place to be. We've had the 60 breeder now for about a year. Let's go take a closer look. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time in the fish room because I know it's noisy. So we're going to go to the other side. We're going to go to the gallery in a second. But I just wanted to show you both of these aquariums. At the top, we have a 75-gallon. This is a tank that is filled with some red-tailed botia right now, some Siamese algae eaters. And down here below, we're using the 60-gallon breeder as a quarantine tank because, well, it turns out it's actually pretty good for that. And so we've got some dwarf rasboras in here, and we've got some really cool cory cats. So let's go ahead. I want to go to the other side. I want to go to the gallery. I want to look at these tanks. What I'm going to show you is a 75-gallon, but I'm also going to put a marker on there that would show you basically where a 60 breeder would end, because the only difference between the two is the height. All right, so yeah, I thought this would be a lot easier to do in the gallery. It's going to be a little bit more quiet. So we're looking at a 75-gallon here. This is the barb tank that we just set up. The red tape that you're looking at, that is where a 60 breeder would end. And so both of these tanks, what they have in common is they're large aquariums. They're both going to be 48 inches long, 18.5 inches wide. The height is where they differ. The 75-gallon is going to be 21.25 inches tall, while the 60 breeder is only 16 inches tall. So that is the main difference between the two. Now, if we're going to look at the similarities, if you're trying to figure out which one of these two aquariums to buy, obviously the 75-gallon is going to be larger. It's going to give you more volume, which is great. That's also going to give you slightly more stocking options because now you can kind of set up these different levels where you can have fish in the higher areas of the aquarium, mid areas, and then lower areas, where the 60 breeder is considerably shorter, and so you're not going to get those levels quite as easy. The other thing that's really nice about them both, because they are the same length and they are the same width, that means aquarium stands, lids, lights, and really for the most part filtration is all going to be the same. That means for your 60 breeder, it's going to be really easy to find those things because they're already standard sizes for a 75-gallon. They've been out for decades. All right, so when you're deciding what are the main differences, one, obviously the height. That's what we've already talked about in this video. You're only getting the 16 inches of height in a 60 breeder compared to the 21.25 inches for the 75-gallon. The price is something else to consider, and before I actually did the research, I was kind of shocked that the price is so different. Right now, I went on to Petco. That's where most people buy their aquariums, especially these two sizes. The standard price for a 75-gallon is $290. 50% off, it's $145, so it's not a bad deal. The 60 breeder is considerably cheaper. Even though you're getting the same length, same width, that shortened height means that the 60 breeder is only $200 normal price and only $100 when you are looking at the 50% off sale. So that is definitely a consideration. Now, the other pricing is going to be pretty much the same in terms of your substrate, your rocks, your wood, your plants, your lights. Everything else is mostly going to be the same, but at least you're going to save a little bit of money on the tank itself. Now, here's another big difference, or at least a moderate difference, and that is the stocking options. Now you're looking at the 75-gallon here. Like I said, that extra height, you do get some more options just because you're able to put fish at different levels. Where the 60 breeder, it is a shorter tank. It's going to make it a little bit more difficult to do that. If you want information on stocking options for a 75-gallon, check out that video in the upper right-hand corner, as well as in the description below. That'll give you some ideas of what you can put in a 75-gallon. And for the most part, if you've got a 60 breeder and are looking for options, you can still use that video. I would just cut down on the numbers a little bit. One of the big differences, I think, and perhaps one of the main differences, is aquascaping. Because that 60 breeder is a short aquarium, sometimes it can be hard to make the aquascape look nice with the rocks, the wood, the plants, the plastic caves, what have you, just because that shortened height, given the length and the width, it does make it a little bit more challenging. So just keep that in mind if you're really into aquascaping. That might be slightly more difficult to do. Something else that a lot of people don't consider, and this is going to be especially important if you're going to put this aquarium, let's say, on a upper level of your home, or maybe you live in an apartment, maybe you don't have a basement like we do that's not concrete floors. Weight. The 75 gallon, generally speaking, we say, okay, it's going to be about 10 pounds per gallon. So 75 gallons is going to weigh about 750 pounds. The 60 breeder is only going to be 600 pounds. And so if weight is a concern, the 60 breeder is going to be probably a better option. And something else to consider with the 60 breeder, it's probably going to be easier to maintain for most people. 21¼ inch, 75 gallon, especially if it's on a stand. Sometimes for some people that means you're getting on a step stool just to reach all the way to the bottom of the aquarium if you want to plant plants, move stuff around the substrate, even potentially catching fish. Where the 60 breeder, that extra 5 inches that's missing makes aquarium maintenance a little bit easier to do, whether that's scraping algae or gravel vacuuming. If you do have to catch fish in the 60 breeder, it's going to be a little bit easier to do because it's not such a tall tank. However, the 60 breeder still has the center brace. And so for those of you who have kept the 40 breeder and you don't have that center brace, well, in the 60 breeder, they had to put that center brace in there because, well, it's a 4-foot tank and we want to make sure that the tank integrity is still sound. And so that center brace is still going to be there. So if you're trying to catch fish, you're still going to have that part in the middle that's going to make it a little bit more difficult. One other thing to keep in mind too with the 60 breeders, because it's a shorter tank, you don't have to have the same light intensity to grow plants as you do the 75 gallon, again, because it's not nearly as tall. So you're still going to want a 4-foot light either way, but it doesn't have to be as bright with the 60 breeder because of that reduced height. One of the things I really like the 60 breeder for is exactly what we use it for, and that is for a quarantine tank for larger volumes of fish or larger fish. Now, most people are not going to use a 60 breeder for a quarantine tank, but if I've got to choose between the two, the 60 breeder is a much better option for that. The other thing to consider with the 60 breeder is because it's less volume, when you're doing that, let's say 30% water change, well, it's going to be less water, and that means it's going to be a little bit easier to maintain that tank and do the water changes a little bit faster. So bottom line is this: if I were choosing between the two, the 75 gallon and the 60 breeder, what would I choose? Now, I do think the 60 breeder has a place exactly how we used it in our fish room, and that is it's a great tank if you're stacking aquariums. The 60 breeder can be a really nice option because you can double stack those and not have them be nearly as tall. That's a huge advantage, and one of the reasons why we chose it here as opposed to 75 gallon. But overall, if I was just keeping a single aquarium, and I'm going to be using that 4 foot of wall space, and it's going to be 18.5 inches deep, my preference is for the 75 gallon. I just think dimensionally it looks better. It's an easier tank to scape. I like the idea of having that taller aquarium and having more fish swimming around that tank. The 60 breeder is a great tank, but again, it's just a personal preference thing for me. But I would love to hear from you in the comments section below. Which one do you prefer? And by the way, if you want to have more ideas in terms of stocking options really for either tank, check out that video in the upper right hand corner. And if you are thinking about a 4-foot tank, consider the 55 gallon. I've got the 75 versus the 55 gallon in the lower right hand corner. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.